Hello, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us today on our webinar, The Evolution of BYOD and Enterprise Mobile Security. Today, we're going to take you through the evolution of BYOD and enterprise mobile security. Let's go over some hygiene. If you have any questions, please submit them in the Q&A box. You have Richard and I here today to answer all of your questions. If we don't know the answer, don't worry. We'll follow up with you afterwards. This is a live recorded webinar and you will get the recording sent out. We'll get the recording sent out after we're done. My name is Monique Vicente and I am the product marketing manager here at Zimperium. And we have Richard. Richard, say hello to our audience today.
Hello, everyone. My name is Richard Malik. I'm the Director of Threat and Research over here at Zimperium, here to give you all the nuggets of information on why mobile threats are real.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to start off with this quote. First off, I love this quote by Google Threat Analyst Group. Richard actually presented this quote on the last Mobile Threat Predictions webinar. It really highlights how BYOD and the distributed workforce have drastically changed the attack surface. There are more mobile attacks than ever, and it really reinforces that the threat is real and that organizations need to secure mobile endpoints. Richard, why did you choose this on the last webinar?
You know, I really love the fact that Maddie Stone and Clement Lesinge, who are very, very prominent and respected members of the malware research and threat research community, came out and admitted that essentially the rise of mobile devices, the rise of popularity, the change in the work environment that we have all experienced with mobile devices being our go-to has definitely made them a vector of attack that malicious actors are targeting. And it was almost validation to what we have been talking about for 10 years.
Awesome. Well, it's been 2 years and a large part of the workforce still working remotely. As the coronavirus ebbs and flows, organizations are still hesitant to bring employees back to the office. And we've seen this working, in a hybrid scenario. Employees are more productive than ever in this modern workforce, and they have the ability to collaborate effectively through mobile devices. And there's also a shift in their quality of life. This wouldn't have been possible without mobile endpoints and productivity tools. And times have changed. In recent years, attackers have started to focus on unsecured mobile devices due to the growing number of connections, as well as the personal and private data that are found on mobile devices. Richard, what do you think about, this post-pandemic and the rise of mobile threats right now?
It's an interesting thing. I was talking about this with some other researchers earlier. Where we live today in terms of working remote and being distributed away from our offices, as technologists, we did not expect this for 5 to 10 years. But COVID, the lockdown, the changes that we have all experienced that have all impacted it really expedited that push for us to be outside the office walls. And there are some organizations that are definitely still learning how to manage this. We're not going back. You can't, the cat's out of the bag. We all know how good this can be for us. And so it's very interesting from the technological and security side to see how we as a world are evolving.
Absolutely. And it's kind of funny that you say that, because when it comes to work from home, that was only, like a perk a few years ago. And now it's pretty much turning into a requirement. When you look at job postings, it's like 100% work from home. So that's very interesting that you brought that up. As we discussed the evolution of BYOD in this webinar, one common thread that we have noticed here at Zimperium is enabling productivity tools like Office 365 on mobile devices. And I think this is a good time for our first poll question. Do you enable mobile access to Office 365 to your employees? So I definitely want to hear from our audience. Do you enable, not only, don't think about it as just Office 365, think about it as other productivity tools as well, such as Gmail. In a recent survey that we conducted, 84% of enterprises are enabling Office 365 on mobile devices. Clearly, it makes sense with the ability to collaborate through applications like Teams, and you can seamlessly meet through mobile. But one point that really stands out to me when I take a look at this stat is employees who have access to Office 365 through their mobile devices, they have access to sensitive corporate information. And the first place my mind goes is this is an all or nothing access that can pose a risk to the business. Richard, what are your thoughts on this type of access on mobile devices?
There's a interesting balance that every organization needs to play between risk and reward and access and convenience. As we have gone mobile and distributed and left the confines of our office space, these mobile devices are increasingly more accessible, and they are providing us the capability to be effective and work remote and all this kind of stuff, which is incredible. But at the same time, the amount of data and access and passwords and critical information, both personal and enterprise focused, that are unprotected, unsecured, is absolutely astounding. Uh, how does an organization approach that security while also respecting the privacy of their users? That's a balance, and it's a very delicate balance that is necessary to maintain.
Absolutely. And you bring up a really good point with privacy. So, for example, in working for a company, you have, mobile device management. And there are times when you're trying to access your email account for work and you get bombarded with this notification that says, if you have to let us manage this device in order to check your email. And there are times where employees are like, no, I'm not going to do that because of privacy. I have my personal photos, I have my contacts, I even have messages. Where does that line blur from letting a corporate environment come into your phone? So I think when it comes to enabling access on mobile phones, that's definitely something that's top of mind for employees, not only in a distributed workforce environment, but even in a corporate setting, like if you're going into the office. So I think that's a really good point. Now, we asked security leaders in the enterprise, what is their top endpoint worry? 36% of enterprises say a remote office is their top worry. 30% say BYOD, and 11% say mobile devices. I mean, one could say that these are all related. When I look at this data, BYOD is definitely top of mind for me because mobile threats are only going to increase. And when it comes to devices, the user has full control and visibility over these devices. This includes your IT managers and the workforce. They can't make you update your OS to reduce risk. Richard, what are your thoughts on mobile devices and us as users having this type of control in the workforce?
This goes back to this idea of how do you secure your devices that aren't yours, from an enterprise perspective, and also how do you enable your employees to be productive? How do you enable them to have the workflows that they have established over the past 2 years and without interfering with them? We've allowed tablets, we've allowed mobile devices, we've allowed remote access, all within within our ecosystems, within our corporate space. But so many of these vectors of access are also vectors of attack. And traditional endpoint security does not scale beyond this. Enterprises are not capable of controlling my internet connection. They don't have configuration control of my routers. They don't get to say what devices are connected in. So one of the things that I look at this and I say, what about the other devices that are connected into the network, into the personal network, that network is then connected back to the enterprise? Mobile devices, BYOD, remote offices, those are all the same thing. But if an organization isn't going, how are we going to protect what we can control? Like what is in your orbit of control? And they're just kind of going, okay, we're just going to allow you to do your job, and we'll figure it out later. They're essentially saying security does not matter. So they need to be addressed. All three of these areas need to be addressed.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially, doesn't matter if you're working in the office. It doesn't matter if you're in the office. You're using your own device. That elevates risk right away, regardless if it's mobile or not. You're using a tablet, you're using a laptop, or even your mobile device. Now, overall, why does anyone care about mobile security? Richard, with digital initiatives, if there's something of business value and it's at risk, people are enabling access to mobile devices. Like what do you have to say about digital initiatives?
The digital initiative of everything we're delivering, everything that we're doing on our mobile devices is incredible. The mobile phone, as it stands in our pocket, is more powerful than all the computers combined that took us to the moon. That's something to be said. I mean, it's thousands upon thousands times more effective and more productive than those computers of the back of the yesteryear. They've enabled us to work remote. They've enabled us to have the applications and the blurring of lines between personal and work life. It allows us to be effective anywhere. But the digital transformation has also opened up the avenues of attack, and so organizations need to start thinking, okay, well, this mobile phone that is in my hands has just as much power, just as much capability as the desktop that's on my desk. My laptop is just the same amount of power. Why am I only securing one of them? Why am I only applying next generation technologies like zero trust ideas? Why am I only thinking about compliance on that desktop and not thinking about where that can come into the mobile device? The mobile device is essentially the ATM to all of our data. The desktop, the laptop, those are the bank branches, and whereas the servers where the stores all of our corporate information, that's the main bank, that's the vault. And if someone is able to break into that ATM and get one point of access back to the branch or back to the main vault, that's all that is necessary. We look at these elements that are on the slide: remote working, zero trust, compliance mandates, mobile apps, Office 365, bring your own device. All of these are things that we have to think about every single day as we enable mobile employees, remote workers, distributed, hybrid, whatever approach your organization is taking. We have to be thinking about what is the security that's protecting that data stream, because the only big main difference between a mobile device and a laptop is that a laptop, the user has to select the Wi-Fi signal that they're connecting to. A mobile phone, it's always connected. It's always looking for a new connection. So there's always new potential attack vectors. Mobile phone is something that can be easily stolen. And if security is not enabled, if there are bad applications on that, it could compromise full networks as part of a larger attack chain. And we are seeing that in our research. We are talking about that constantly over on our threat blog. The digital transformation that we're all experiencing right now is only going to help push attackers into finding new vectors of attack into our ecosystem. So we need to start standing up technologies and protocols and procedures that can counter that.
Absolutely. And when you really think about mobile phones and you think about, your daily transactions, this is not just, purchasing things. This is your interactions on a day-to-day basis. You're texting people, you're using it for multi-factor authentication, you're using it to make phone calls, and you're using it to access banking information. All of this information is sensitive to attackers, to adversaries. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, you're using this same device to access your corporate data through productivity tools such as Office 365. And I think, this entire story as a whole, this is where you really see that BYOD evolution and needing to secure these productivity tools because of how much transactions we have throughout the day. And this is perfect. I really like this. And going into mobile threats, Richard, you've done a lot of research on mobile threats. How about you give us some information on what you've what you've uncovered so far.
Yeah, this is a fun one, and y'all, I hope you take away from this the impact that mobile has had in the last year. So this chart represents the number of zero-day real-life attacks targeting mobile devices. Now, that could be ecosystems within a specific mobile platform that's only mobile specific, like WebKit, which is iOS, or a chipset that's used within mobile phones like Qualcomm and Android. But this chart represents since 2015 the number of in the wild real-life attacks, 0 days exploits that have been detected and reported and responded to. Now, this is a grander scheme. In 2016, we see a small little blip. That's 3 exploits that were discovered. Those 3 were related back to the original discovery of Pegasus targeting iOS and Android devices. Those 3 0-day exploits are all iOS specific. 2017, 2018, not really much. 2019, there was a little bit of a blip. We went up to 4. 2020, we went back down to 3. Now, 2020, that's of course when we started going remote distributed. 2021, we shot up to 17. And this is where it gets really interesting. 17 of those vulnerabilities of the 57 total of last year directly targeted mobile devices. So to put this into perspective in terms of numbers, we've got 2016, 2019, and 2020 representing around 10% of the 0-day exploits in the wild used in real-life attacks. We shot up to 31% in 2021. So 1 in 3 0-day exploits used in attack were iOS or Android. Now, let's get that into a little bit more perspective. Some of you are sitting here going, thinking, I have an Apple device. I am secure. Are you? I think you'd be shocked to know that over 60% of all 0-day in the wild attacks have targeted iOS devices. That means the device has failed, has been used in an attack, and in part of an attack chain to either spy, to steal, whatever it is that the malicious actors are doing and wanting to get, they are finding the exploits. I'm going to get that into a little bit more perspective. There is organizations that will pay for 0-day exploits. On the Android side, a 0-day drive, no-click 0-day exploit, they will pay $2.5 million for. An unreported one. It has to be unreported. On iOS, it's only $2 million. Now, that's still a substantial amount of money. It is actually significantly more than what we're seeing on the traditional endpoint side. But that's because they're a little bit more rare. But when they are there, they are effective. Look how long Pegasus existed before it was detected. Look how long Joker has been going on, and Brata coming back. Malware, just because we talk about it, exploits just because we talk about it, doesn't mean it goes away. It continues to return. It continues to get updated and used against us. And we're seeing more and more advanced exploits and malware and attacks coming out and targeting your iOS and Android devices. Now, some organizations are doing a really good job of protecting against it, but there's only so much that they can do without impacting the usability. And that's why it gets into that concerning area. When you have your organization out there, accessing your data, being productive on their mobile devices, are you absolutely 100% sure they haven't been targeted? They haven't been exploited, are not being used as part of a larger scale attack chain against your enterprise. Even if their password from Facebook has been compromised, are you sure they haven't used that password on their login credentials? It's one of those big concerns, and we're seeing it with the data here, that the attacks against mobile are definitely increasing.
That's great. This really highlights on something I've noticed in the past few years is you talk about traditional endpoints, you talk about, your laptops, you talk about like logging and network sensors. But one thing that was never really top of mind in talking about traditional endpoints is mobile endpoints. So I'm still grappling with, the theory of have enterprise companies or organizations in general, have they really grasped the concept that mobile devices need to be considered part of their endpoint?
Yeah, that's a bigger thing. It's what I kind of come back to with the treating our traditional endpoints and mobile endpoints the same. The advanced security that we're providing out to our traditional endpoints and our traditional networks definitely needs to be extended out to our mobile devices, because they are just as powerful, just as susceptible, and in most cases have even more critical data accessible to them.
Mm-hmm. And when you think about mobile device management and mobile application management, is this enough to secure Office 365 on mobile? And that's I guess it's a good time to launch one of our poll questions, which is MDM, MAM enough to secure Office 365 on mobile? So definitely want to hear from the audience, their thoughts on that. And when it comes to protecting mobile, why do we need to protect it, and why should we care? Um, Mobile phones have the intellectual data to access Office 365, Salesforce, and the personal side of things. That means there's an average of 80 personal apps on your phone, and some could link information, and we see apps that scan others. And Richard, what are your thoughts on these top 4 points that you've seen from doing your risk research?
60% of endpoints connected in are mobile. That's both tablets and phones, and managed and unmanaged. So you have your corporate provided and your BYOD. So that extends across all of it. But the number of apps that we're seeing on the devices is definitely increasing. We haven't seen as much of an adoption over 2021 because everyone adopted their mobile apps in 2020. But 5 to 10, upwards of some organizations reporting back 18 apps that they use specifically for their work every single day. It's absolutely incredible. But ultimately, every single one of these organizations, is looking at how can they use their mobile device to really focus in on their credibility and device attestation and data attribution. Are they qualifying the identity of the individual that's connecting in with that phone? And so we're seeing a lot of organizations using two-factor authentication, multi-factor authentication to turn these mobile devices into digital IDs, which there's this balancing thing. Enterprises are using the mobile phone to confirm the identity of the individual, but they're not securing that mobile phone. And we're seeing malicious applications that are now monitoring multi-factor authentication alerts. They're monitoring for those codes in order to break into other services. The malware is getting more aggressive because they know what their target audience is using, and digital IDs is definitely it.
Absolutely. And this kind of goes back to what I was saying with, the daily transactions that you're doing on your phone. Even though an adversary may not compromise the actual device itself, but the fact they can use other vectors such as applications, rogue Wi-Fi's to access that personal information that these applications are giving. So for example, if an application gives certain permissions, an adversary can come in and read those permissions and kind of get an idea of what your day-to-day is like and even get credentials. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. And it gets even scarier when you see what they're targeting and how they're aggressively pushing apps to send the information out. So there's one piece of malware that we've recently discovered that once installed, it starts sending out the phone number of the device out to over 250 services to try to get a multi-factor authentication push sent down to the device so it can monitor. And it's looking for everything from US-centric services like Google and Facebook and Instagram to Yandex and Russian social media services, Chinese social media services. It's a wide range of organizations it's tried to compromise. And some of them are very enterprise focused.
Well, this is perfect because we already discussed the why. Now let's dive into the how. There are 4 primary device vectors on mobile: device, network, malicious applications, and mobile phishing. Mobile devices, they have access to corporate data, personal information, and more on their own through different applications. In mobile, when all apps are on containers, the only way to be persistent is to compromise the actual device itself. Like we just said, you don't have to get to the actual device. You can leverage like applications, network, and phishing to access this sensitive information. Malicious networks, fake Wi-Fi's, rogue access points, mobile phishing, there are ways to deliver an exploit or even steal credentials directly from the device itself. And when it comes to these attackers, their primary risk is the employees having access to these devices, enabling access to productivity tools. Productivity tools in a BYOD or distributed workforce, they're there to help us work faster, work smarter. And, it is important to understand the risk. Richard, what are some other risks that you can tell us today around these 4 vectors?
Within the device side, there's always the compromised device concern that, hey, is that device been jailbroken? Has it been rooted? Is it not running an updated operating system? Some of these companies that are manufacturing phones, they only support security for 2 years. Others are even less. Or what if someone picks up a phone while they're traveling overseas, from a less reputable builder? Are you confident that it is accessing the data, and the data that it's accessing isn't being sent off to somewhere else? Well, within the network side, there was an interesting map that we talked about a couple months ago in one of my presentations, showing off the Tokyo Olympics, and we were able to, with the data that we collected from the risk, we're able to map out the malicious networks that were installed along train lines and subway lines. We're able to see major hubs of transportation. Malicious networks exist all over. It could be something that they're trying to spy on the content or redirect content or redirect user applications. It's malware. You've got compromised apps. You've got apps that have their ad networks compromised. So even if the app is legitimate, there might be a compromised ad that's being delivered up that could deliver up a phishing link, and that gets over to the phishing side. Phishing is still the number one form of attack that's effective. Why? Because of users. And on a mobile phone, it's even more effective. We cannot follow those same practices that they teach us in all these security trainings. You can't see the full link half the time. You can't see the header, or the screen is so small that the information is cut off. But the mobile device is definitely providing a susceptible vector of attack for malicious actors.
That's great. Now, when it comes to mobile threats, Gartner has mentioned in its market guides, its briefings, and even at the last summit that mobile threats are real, and you need to have mobile threat defense. Enabling Office 365 and other productivity tools, you have to have MTD enabled on your device. Mobile threat defense, this solution is basically the equivalent of EPP and EDR. Mobile threat defense is also a top 10 requirement for securing Office 365. And that's definitely something we heard at the last, Gartner Summit. Richard, what are your thoughts on Gartner understanding? And they get it. The threat is real.
Yeah, it goes back to even what I said about Google and Project Zero. It's wonderful that Gartner is actually seeing this in terms of the larger perspective, but they're seeing it as also like, how are we really delivering beyond the legacy approach? Mobile device management, of course, has been a standard for mobile endpoint enablement for the longest time, but management is only that. It's management. There is no security control that really comes into play with that. You're not getting the data attribution that needs to be feeding into a SOC or a SIM for the team to be able to respond. And so Gartner coming on and saying, hey, in order to be world-class security, in order to be ready for the attacks and threats of tomorrow, you really need to be looking at next, what is next in terms of mobile threat defense.
Yeah, absolutely. And, going into our customers, they understand the threat is real and they're doing their part to secure mobile devices. This is a theme. The theme is critical, and device integrity on the fly, it's important. So, for example, Eric Green, there's the security gap on mobile. It's important. Even Elizabeth from Danaher, the attacks are real, and she's pretty direct about it. And even John Roos, it becomes quite obvious that there's a gap in security. So other enterprises, they get it. And sometimes it's not only security first, it's we want to protect productivity. Because when it comes to mobile device management, it significantly restricts the actual device, whereas integrating an MTD solution helps you, it can really help loosen the restrictions and allow employees to be more productive. Don't you think, Richard?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these are not small companies. JPMC, TikTok, and Donner, they are not small organizations. And what we're seeing here is them coming out and saying, "Wait a second, we need to stay ahead of the threats, and we need to start thinking about something beyond just endpoint security and management. It is something that we need to be addressing today."
Absolutely. And don't forget, folks, if you have any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat box or Q&A. Now, zero trust, it's a framework, and conditional access, it's a form of zero trust. Richard, I know you can speak really highly of this particular slide.
Yeah, so let's come out and say it real quick right away. Zero trust is an architecture. It's an ever-moving target. So if an organization is coming to you and saying, "We are going to solve your zero trust needs," maybe not. Zero trust is something that is made up of the needs that fit within your organization. It's an architecture. You're building an office. You're building a building, and every building is different. So you have to bring in the services that help to deliver to that service and that need that you have. So zero trust is always verified, never trust, or never trust, always verified, depending on how you want to say the quote. And the idea, the mindset is there that if you have somebody accessing data from an endpoint, be it a mobile, be it a desktop, be it a laptop, be it a server, wherever, they're accessing the data, you need to confirm their identity. So it's always coming in and saying, "Hey, we need to just make sure that you are who you are." Now, zero trust is the framework of conditional access and is ultimately something that enables organizations to expand the BYOD market and enable productivity tools like Office 365 without the risk of their data kind of getting out. If my laptop is here in the United States, but my phone for some reason is connecting into corporate data from another country, if you do not have conditional access, if you do not have zero trust enabled, ultimately, you're putting your information at risk. You don't know who's accessing that data. But if you are looking at it from a standpoint of, can you trust that device? Can you trust the identity? Can you trust the posture of that device? Is it secured? Is it meeting the minimum security requirements to access your data? Yes, they're allowed into the enterprise. Ultimately, the two classifications, managed and unmanaged devices, you can still apply zero trust to, and we highly encourage it because, again, mobile device is very, very easily stolen and can be taken anywhere. And without the security controls in place, somebody could be accessing it. But on BYOD, a major part of why Office 365 is out there is because Microsoft is working with us and other folks. Instead of just managing the entire device, they're going through to security organizations like us and saying, "Hey, we want to provide security around the perimeter of our application. Office 365, we need to have the device attestation, the data attribution to know, is this device secure enough for our clients to allow their employees to access the data?" We've enabled it through an SDK that allows the user to come in to get into their Outlook or say their Office 365 Word and be able to get that data that they need. But if it doesn't meet the minimum requirements, of course, it's going to be denied. And that's where you need that idea, because how much information is provided through your email, through Microsoft Word, through the cloud-based access. Access identity of the one person on the device is absolutely critical with zero trust. And mobile, if you forget to include mobile in your zero trust architecture, even at the bare minimum, you are not having an effective zero trust architecture within your ecosystem. Now, if you are looking at Microsoft and you're saying, "Hey, what is Microsoft calling it?" They're calling it conditional access, but ultimately they both fit into the same category.
Absolutely. Now, this is definitely a good point, a good time to play our last polling question, which is, which of the following mobile endpoint protections do you have in place for your organization today? Now, patented on-device detection, Zimperium protects enterprises against mobile risks and attacks. And we do it in two ways. Richard, what are the two ways?
We're doing on device through this is the fun one. We're doing on device through machine learning. So the machine learning isn't living on the device. The machine learning lives up in the cloud, and it's continuously analyzing the threats and risk against mobile devices and applications. And it's building out a mathematical algorithm that we then deliver into the device. So that's the patented on-device detection known as Z9. The Z9 detection engine is our machine learning engine. It's been patented for about 10 years running, and it's the longest running mobile-specific machine learning engine in the world, in the space. And so that's how we're really doing that. But we are looking to secure both the endpoint and the applications. We're securing the employee ultimately, but we're securing those two devices. And so Z9 can be applied into application security. We're using that to understand what kind of threats are targeting applications and building out an application security protocol within our MAPS program. And then there's the application, and then there's the endpoint security aspect of on-device security. Do you have a zero-day threat coming in to target that endpoint? Do you have something that's known like Joker or Brata that's coming back and making a resurgence, or even Pegasus? Pegasus is one of those ones. 50,000 people were targeted. What happens if that gets installed on the device? Is it protected? In all those cases, yes, 100%. So there's the known and unknown threats, targeted attacks. We're protecting the enterprises against these threats, even if they've never been seen before, because ultimately malicious actors are not creating brand new code most often. They're finding new vulnerabilities, but they're not writing new malicious code. They're reusing pieces here and there. We see a lot of exchanges of families and code between the malware that we analyze. And then that has given us a really good understanding of what malware looks like. I actually do want to take this time. There's a question that was asked that's really, whoever asked it, thank you, right on time. Recently, there has been a rise of zero-click attacks in which hackers can breach mobile phones through security flaws in operating systems instead of users opening malicious links and attachments. What are some suggestions about what mechanisms or things can you do to prevent and avoid zero-click attacks? It's a heck of a question. Thank you to whoever asked it. There's a lot of things that an organization can do without coming out and saying buys Imperium. You need an advanced mobile threat defense that understands what a threat looks like, just as I was just talking about. You need to be able to have that device attestation, the data attribution. What is that device connecting to? Is it connecting to malicious networks? Is it connecting to networks that are known malicious networks? A lot of the zero-click attacks that we're seeing are coming through compromised websites, malicious websites, and the likes of that. So advanced phishing protection on the device. Now, let's back up. Phishing is not just something that's sent through a text message. It can come through Telegram. It can come through WhatsApp. The ambassador of Australia to the United States, his Telegram was hacked, or his phone was hacked through a Telegram phishing link. Jeff Bezos' phone, the richest man in the world, his phone was hacked through a phishing link that was sent through WhatsApp. If two extremely powerful and one extremely wealthy individual, if their devices can be compromised through phishing, most likely so could yours, if you do not have the security controls in place to understand and protect and prevent. There's mitigation, there's prevention, there's all these steps that need to be taken. Now, if you are unable to get into the mobile threat defense side, locking down your controls, making sure that you have Wi-Fi connection turned off when you're traveling around, Bluetooth turned off, any kind of controls or connections outwards turned off until you need it, and you are actively in control of what you're accessing. Ad blockers, they don't really work on the iOS side, but on Android, they can be effective, but they're not as effective against the zero clicks. But that really gets into this idea of why you need something that truly understands what a threat looks like Z9. Real big kick on this one. We always get asked this, and it hasn't been asked yet, which makes me a surprise. We are pulling data from the device, but we're not pulling any private or personal information. We are following full GDPR and multiple other countries' compliance laws. We are looking at the risks. So if a device comes in and says, hey, we've detected the phishing link, that phishing information is just sent back to us. We don't care about anything else. We don't care even how it was delivered. We just see the actual threat and risks that the endpoint is seeing. But we're not taking any data that is private or personal or corporate specific off the device in any circumstances. And that's something that you can, as a customer, if you are a customer of ours, can turn on and off based off your needs. I hope I covered that question. If you have another question, please throw it up into the chat box, and I'll answer it.
Great, thanks for covering that.
Yeah.
Now, Zimperium, we have a 360 protection platform, and it's backed by a security ecosystem. And Zimperium integrates seamlessly with SIMs, XDRs, UAMs, that you're using to monitor and manage and secure your environment. Integrating with other technologies is critical, especially if you're investing in security technology. Like, you must fit in with what you already have, because you're pretty much throwing money down the drain if you don't have that capability to do that. What are ways that you can speak to our technology stack and how it's backed by top-notch mobile research?
This is an interesting perspective in terms of how we're approaching the mobile security problem. Instead of trying to solve just one of the areas, we're looking at it from a holistic perspective. And I don't feel that this slide really delivers on that whole perspective. I think the next one does. But that one. There's the slide. Thank you so much. It is an advanced mobile security platform. So we have got two arms of the business. And here's the great thing about it. We're one of the biggest mobile security companies out there in terms of our impact. If you're on Android, we're part of the Google Security Alliance, scanning every single application as part of that group that goes into the Google Play Store. We're integrated into some of the biggest and most distributed mobile applications on iOS and Android around the world. We are out there touching almost 70 million devices every single day. That's 70 million data points that are coming back, or points that are coming back and delivering into us. They're helping to protect you every single day. And it's part of this full mobile protection. You've got the mobile endpoint protection. That's the endpoint security. You've got the security ecosystem. How does it all tie together? You've got the application protection. If your organization has developed an internal app, have you done a penetration test? Do you know if it's secure? Have you used an open source library from GitHub? Is that secure? Have you outsourced it? Have they put a backdoor in accidentally? That's something that we can detect and help apply a security mindset to. With all this knowledge, ultimately the threat research and services, which is where I focus in, is using that data to continue to serve into our machine learning model and our security on the endpoint. Just as Monique said, we're feeding this data into your SIMs and XDRs and UEMs, wherever you need the data, wherever your SOC and your IT managers are looking at your full ecosystem. It is device attestation or data attribution. You know what is connected into your network. You know who's using it. You know what risks are being introduced. You know who's being the most risky. And, that's a good data point for you to turn around and say, hey, you may need a little bit more training, or we need to change your policy on your device to increase the amount of security that comes out with that. But overall, this is our full technology stack that's backed by top-notch mobile threat research, an incredibly powerful and, as I said, the longest running machine learning engine in the mobile security space. And it's with multiple patents. I think we have 3 patents right now on that. But this is how we come out and say we secure mobile.
This is awesome. And, going back to visibility into these devices, it's critical. And when you think about other enterprises out there, enterprise organizations that are striving to meet, XDR, you don't truly have XDR if you don't have that single pane of glass view. And you can only achieve that by integrating mobile endpoints into your traditional endpoints. So that was a really good point you made about visibility, Richard.
Yeah.
This is great. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. We had such an amazing time talking about the evolution of BYOD and why it's critical to secure the enterprise and mobile endpoints. Does anybody else have any questions that we can answer?
Excellent. I want to throw it out there. If anybody's really has any questions that follow up after this, please don't hesitate to reach out to us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. We're there. We're happy to answer them. You can also reach out to us directly through our chat bot and our contact us form. One big thing, I guess I should talk about it. In next month, which is a week away, we're releasing the Global Mobile Threat Report. It is a substantial report, probably one of the most substantial reports about mobile application and mobile endpoint security. That's going to be big. And with that, we also have another webinar coming up in March. I cannot remember the date, but it is coming out March 17th. That's coming up on the Mobile Threat Report. Invite you to join me and one of my cohorts from the Threat Research Time where we talk about it. We also have Securing Mobile Payments on March 29th. So if you have a payment solution that you're worried about, you're accepting payments, you're having a payment app that you're developing, we can talk to you about it then. Pass back to you, Monique.
All right, thank you. Don't forget to tune in next month. We got quite a bit going on. It looks like we got one question. Let's take a look.
I appreciate stating that your software doesn't copy, view, etc. of data, private data on mobile devices, but clients need a system in place to make sure no breaches can happen. You're absolutely right. They do need something in place, but that doesn't need to impact your privacy. We've been doing this for 12 years, and we don't collect private data. If we did, we wouldn't be able to sell into certain markets. And so when we're looking at the data that we're collecting, it is literally just the risk data. If organizations are looking to collect even more information, we are not the solution to help you with that. We are not here to impede on the privacy of your mobile device users, especially in the BYOD space.
Great. Thanks for answering that, Richard.
Yep.
All right. That about wraps it up. Thank you so much, everybody. And any other questions, we'll feel free to reach out to you. Thank you.